I never planned on becoming a hunter of historical ghosts. My field was dry numbers, the analysis of urban planning, and the cold logic of 19th century industrial architecture. However, everything changed the day I stumbled upon a note from the autumn of 1891 in the digitized archives of a Wisconsin municipal library. It was a short article in the New York Times, lost between grain prices and railroad news. But what it described didn't just raise questions, it literally shattered the familiar picture of our world. The article stated that during the excavation of a mound near Lake Geneva, workers discovered remains that by all laws of biology should not have existed. It was the skeleton of a creature whose height exceeded 3 meters. This wasn't a mythological giant from a fairy tale. This was a specific biological object documented by witnesses with precise measurements of the skull and limb length. It was then that I realized we are looking at history through a narrow slit left for us by the authors of textbooks. We are used to thinking of the 19th century as a time of booming steam and the dawn of electricity. But behind the facade of this industrial showcase, a massive general cleanup was taking place. Someone was very carefully scrubbing the basements of human memory, getting rid of everything that couldn't be explained by the logic of linear progress. That Wisconsin skeleton wasn't an error of nature, it was an exhibit. An exhibit that, like hundreds of others, vanished without a trace into the archives of major institutions the moment the light of official science fell upon it. Let's turn to the details, which at the time were recorded with the pedantry of forensic pathologists. The 1891 report stated, the femur of this creature was 1.5 times longer than that of the tallest man of that era. The cranial vault had a volume nearly double the norm. But most striking were the proportions. While modern medicine knows cases of gigantism caused by pituitary pathology, we see something else here. Pathological gigantism is always a disease, fragile bones, a curved spine, asymmetry. In Wisconsin, however, an athletically built skeleton was found with a powerful bone framework designed for colossal loads. A witness named Cyrus Thomas, who worked for the Smithsonian Institution at the time, personally described similar finds in his early reports. He recorded details that seem like science fiction today. Double rows of teeth, massive jaws, and skulls with flat foreheads. Imagine the scale. A rib cage so wide that a modern adult man could freely fit inside it without touching the ribs. This is not an exaggeration for dramatic effect. These are measurement data published in the press of the time. The articles of those years were not chasing clout in our modern sense. They were a reflection of a reality where people suddenly came face to face with the remains of a preceding civilization. And immediately after the publication of these data, the mechanism of silence was turned on. As soon as a fine fell into the hands of official commissions, it ceased to exist. No refutations, no scientific conferences, just a blank space in a catalog where a unique artifact stood only yesterday. If the Wisconsin case were an isolated incident, we could write it off as a collective hallucination or a hoax. But if we expand our search parameters, we see that the entire world in the late 19th and early 20th centuries became a site for the mass discovery of inconvenient bones.
Take Ohio. 1880, a group of amateur archaeologists opened a mound and found a group of skeletons ranging from 8 to 10 feet tall. The remains were sent to the Peabody Museum of Archaeology. Where are they now? The official response: information is unavailable. Move to South Africa. At the beginning of the 20th century, bone fragments were found there indicating the existence of hominids 4 meters high. Local newspapers were full of headlines. Scientists went to the site, made casts, and suddenly the topic was closed. The materials disappeared into the basements of European universities under the pretext of the need for further study, which has lasted for 100 years now. Look at the finds in the caves of Kentucky or on the rocky islands of the Pacific Ocean. Everywhere, the scenario is the same. 1. A sensational discovery involving engineers or road builders. 2. Documentation in the local press with names of witnesses. 3. Transfer of materials to major scientific centers, Smithsonian, British Museum, Academy of Sciences. And 4. The complete disappearance of artifacts from the registries. This is not negligence. This is a protocol. When you find dozens of confirmations of the same phenomenon on different continents, and all of them lead to the same black hole of state archives, you begin to understand there is a tacit agreement on what history should be. In this history, there is no place for those who were bigger than us, stronger than us, or possessed knowledge that we are unable to replicate.
Here we come to the most important question. Why hide the obvious? The answer lies in the very structure of our science. Official history is not a search for truth. It is a perimeter guard. Imagine that you have spent years building the theory of Darwinism, creating a linear scale of progress where a savage with a stick gradually turns into a gentleman in a frock coat. And suddenly, a skeleton of a 3-meter creature bursts into this scheme. A creature that lived long before us and, judging by the context of the burials, possessed a high culture. This destroys everything. If there were giants before us, then history is not linear. It means we are not the pinnacle of evolution, but perhaps only the degraded descendants of more perfect beings. The mechanism of denial is interesting. Major institutions do not say this didn't happen. They say this was incorrectly identified. Mastodon bones, a mistake by workers, exaggeration by journalists. This is the standard set of excuses. But then why don't they show these mastodon bones to close the question once and for all? Why are there gaps in the numbering in the inventory books of the Smithsonian Institution for certain years? I spent weeks studying old shipping manifests. Dozens of boxes with archaeological material from mounds were delivered to Washington, received by curators, but never exhibited in the halls. They turned into information noise. The system has learned to ignore facts that do not fit into the approved version of reality. This is a form of censorship that is scarier than any ban. When a fact is not denied, but simply removed from the zone of attention until the last witnesses die.
But bones are only half the truth. There is something more tangible that cannot be hidden in museum basements: our cities themselves. Look at the architecture of the late 19th century in any corner of the planet. From St. Petersburg to Melbourne, from Buenos Aires to New York. We see buildings that are called neoclassicism or eclecticism. But if we cast aside labels and look at the scale, it becomes unsettling. Doorways 5 to 6 meters high. Windows starting at the head level of a modern person. Staircase steps that seem uncomfortable for our stride. We are told that this is grandeur of architectural design. But in a world where every square meter costs money and heating huge halls requires colossal resources, such extravagance seems like madness. Would you build a house with 8-meter ceilings if your height were 5'7"? Would you put door handles at the level of your shoulder? These buildings look as if they were simply adapted for us by cutting in new floors and reducing the openings. Notice the buildings of post offices, train stations, and government offices of that period. They were built with a margin of safety that exceeds any conceivable needs of the 19th century. The use of giant stone blocks, filigree processing of hard rock, acoustic systems that work on principles we are only beginning to understand. It seems that the architecture of that time was not art, but technology. Technology created for beings of a different scale. We simply moved into these empty sets, declared ourselves their builders, and studiously ignore the fact that in these doorways, we look like children in an adult's house.
When the facts become too numerous, official science puts forward its last argument. It was acromegaly. They say all these found giants are just sick people with a hormonal imbalance. But there is a trap here. Acromegaly and gigantism are systemic failures of the body. People with such diagnoses suffer from fragile joints. Their bones are porous, and their faces are often deformed. Now look at the descriptions of the finds from Wisconsin, Ohio, or France. They describe skeletons with powerful teeth preserved in ideal condition, with bones of such density that workers could not break them with shovels. Moreover, a disease is not a mass phenomenon within a single burial. Yet we find entire necropolises where dozens and hundreds of such beings lie. Did all the people with gigantism on the entire continent gather in one valley to die together in one mound? This is absurd. Statistics are a stubborn thing. If groups of people taller than 2.5 meters with proportional physiques are discovered in different parts of the world, it is not an anomaly. It is a species. And it is this biological fact that is the most dangerous. For if their existence is recognized, it will have to be admitted that the Darwinian ladder leads not up, but perhaps sideways or down.
We have been conditioned to believe in progressive development. The Stone Age, bronze, iron. This convenient chain creates an illusion of control over time. But what if this chain is an artificial construct, created in the middle of the 19th century? Have you noticed how synchronously the traces of the old world began to be destroyed all over the world? Great fires in major cities, massive reconstruction, the demolition of buildings that would have stood for centuries. This was a clearing of space for a new history. In this new history, man must feel like a small but proud conqueror of nature, not an heir to forgotten titans. The Tartarian concept is not just a search for a vanished empire. It is an attempt to find the point where history was rewritten. The great exhibitions of the late 19th century, like the World's Fair in Chicago,
show us incredible cities supposedly built in a few months out of plaster and sticks, which were then demolished or burned. What if these cities were real? What if the exhibitions were just a way to legalize the use of captured ancient ruins before finally destroying or rebuilding them? We live in a world of edited texts. We have been left only with the chapters that do not raise unnecessary questions. But the questions remain, in the very proportions of our streets, in the strange voids of museum halls, and in those very old newspapers that they haven't managed to destroy yet.
History is not what is recorded in books. It is what you see when you stop trusting the inscriptions on the plaques. The case of the Wisconsin giant of 1891 is just one stitch in a vast canvas of lies that began to be woven more than 100 years ago. The next time you walk past an old administrative building with its absurdly high windows and doors, do not believe the guide. Just look at those stones. Feel their scale. Ask yourself, for whom were these steps actually designed? The pattern is clear. Discovery, recording, removal, oblivion. This cycle was repeated hundreds of times until we turned into a nation with amnesia. But truth has a way of leaking through any archives. The giants didn't vanish from history. They were simply edited out of the frame, like inconvenient witnesses. But the sets remained. And as long as we walk through these sets, we have a chance to remember who we actually were and who built this world before it was turned into a museum of our own impotence. History is not the past. It is the battle for our understanding of the present. And in this battle, our main weapon is the ability to notice what we have been ordered not to see. The giants were real.